I'd like to introduce you today to the moderator of this panel, Mr. Pinkesh Shah. He is ex-Global Vice President of McAfee and is also a senior faculty at Institute of Product Leadership and an incredible mentor. Anyone who has ever had a conversation with him will tell you that you will walk away with amazing insights. So I'd request Mr. Shah to introduce today's panelists and speakers. Over to you, Mr. Shah. Thank you.
Hey, thanks. I hope you guys can hear me okay.
Yep.
I see there's a lot of people still trickling in. We're about 600 and counting more. So a fantastic opportunity to interact with many of you. And I hope you have your questions fired up. It is absolutely a pleasure to host this today. I got this chance to discuss and meet, at least virtually, our star votes for today. Can I ask the panelists to also maybe turn on their video and audio so we can all see them as well? Excellent. So I'm gonna introduce the speakers one by one, but I think before I do that, I want to set a little bit of context for why this panel, as an opening panel for this festival, makes perfect sense, right? Chief Product Officer. This was a title that was not very visible, not very popular as early as even 10 years ago, right? This is, in fact, product management has been a profession that has been more recently talked about in the last 15 years or so since it originated, and in India in the last 7 years or so since this has become very, very popular. A quick LinkedIn search shows that there are about 400,000 chief product officers in the United States, only about 37,000 in India. Now, assuming that a lot of these folks who on LinkedIn may be in title called a chief product officer, but in reality maybe even 10% of them may be playing the role, this is still a big deal. Product management as a profession getting a C-level role in the organization is absolutely a cause for celebration, because this is very new and very nascent. C-level title is something, it's a big deal, given that every product professional now wants to grow up in the career and potentially achieve the chief product officer. And we have so little of this discipline understood, let alone being practiced. And so out of that small pool of elite chief product officers in India, we have 4 amazing stars who are chief product officers in their own industry, in their own domain, in their own companies, who I have here with me. So without further ado, let me kind of introduce them real quick and get the conversation going. But again, being a panel discussion, I certainly hope that all of you are going to fire up the right questions for them and get a chance to interact where they can answer them directly as well. So feel free to start pouring your questions on the LinkedIn thread. So the first chief product officer that I want to introduce to all of you is Rajiv. Rajiv, if you're just going to say a quick hello so that we all know,
hey guys.
The lovely face behind the lovely profile. So Rajiv is the chief product officer at ClearTrip, a company that is a household name and I think known to just about every one of you, I'm sure, in India, but I'm sure globally as well. 7 million tickets sold annually. And I'm sure, after COVID, they're going to start selling tickets to Mars as well, presumably with a lot more virus-free zones there. But more than ClearTrip, Rajiv has an exemplary background with 16 years of experience in consumer internet and enterprise businesses. He's been, working through the ranks as a product manager, as a product leader in a variety of companies in India and Silicon Valley, including Ask.com, his prior stints at Yahoo.com, CBS Interactive, and also some roles in Boston Consulting, in management consulting. In his most recent stint, he was actually the vice president for Ola, another household name and brand that I'm sure everybody is familiar here. So with that, welcome Rajiv, and here's my first question to kind of get started on this for you, as I introduce every single panelist one after the other. Was this a natural progression, Rajiv, as you kind of go through the ranks from product manager to a chief product officer? Did you plan for it? Was this something that you had a specific goal? How did it happen?
I think it was a partly serendipity also, right? And I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to be here, right? Of course, I wanted to be here, but it was not necessarily planned as such, right? I think it was a sequence of events and sequence of opportunities that were provided to me across along my career, and I guess lots of things kind of fell in place, and it's just so happened that I kind of moved, progressed through that track. But yeah, it's been incredible, and I'm very grateful to all my previous mentors and managers who kind of helped me, get along to this path. And I still have a lot of learning left to do myself. So I'm still kind of going along the path of learning anyway.
Awesome. All stars are always very humble. And so here's one more that we have an interaction chance today. So welcome.
Thank you.
Rajiv, the next stalwart I wanna introduce is Anurag. Anurag, if you do a quick hello, so we all know, to associate a face with the name. Anurag is the Chief Product Officer for another internationally known brand, one that, I don't know if you know Anurag, but I have a personal story, before I announce the name of the company for others, where I pretty much survived on this food from this chain in my master's that I was doing in Purdue. Pretty much this was a kind of staple food, being a vegetarian. So Anurag is the Chief Product Officer of Domino's, a multifunctional product leader who has worked in a variety of domains, in a variety of set of cross kind of industries, from Microsoft to OLX, to even Siksha, one of the largest ed tech company, in India or probably in the world, variety of roles in Nokia, including leadership and business development roles. I think Anurag, you're probably a good and an awesome role model for a lot of folks who would call, or who would aspire to become what I call a cross-functional specialist. You've obviously worked across domains, across industries, and so in some sense, as a cross-functional, cross-domain specialist, here's my opening question for you, Anurag. What does it take? I was going to say, are there any deals for Domino's? But that's probably a bad joke right now, with COVID going on. But the real question is, what is a typical day for a chief product officer at Domino's look like, right? Give us a sense for what is a day in the life of a CPO for you. Anurag, you're probably on mute. So if you want to unmute,
I wonder if he's busy eating a pizza.
Can you guys hear me now? Okay.
Anurag, we still can't hear you. If you are talking, looks like you are talking, but we still can't hear you. Okay, looks like the pizza is still getting baked, so we will get back to Anurag in a minute, and kind of continue with the rest of the panelists to introduce them. So the next one I wanna introduce is Gaurav. Gaurav, as you see on the screen, he's the Chief Product Officer of another amazing brand. It's called True Blue. And I think many of you may know this. True Blue is a venture, between Arvind Mills and Sachin Tendulkar, a graduate of NIFT who has studied fashion, who has built an entire career around design and leadership track around products. Worked with a lot of brands like Levi's and Proline. Aditya Birla obviously worked at Jabong. Managing private labels, and now managing the True Blue line of business. So here's the question for you, Gaurav. As a C-level product leader, do you think it is better to be specialized and have a deeper sense of skill set in one zone, and then kind of fan out to become a cross-functional leader, or versus being a generalist where you know a little bit about everything, and then you kind of step up. In your opinion, which of the two, a specialist versus a generalist, what is faster in your opinion to get to a C-level role, especially in the product space?
Okay, so in my opinion, it will be a mix of both. I think we should enter the industry with a specialized field, experience that whole journey, experience the problems of other functions, understand the technicalities, because that's the time when you're actually developing yourself as an individual performer. I think so. Entering through a specialized skill and then maybe widening it. So as you start understanding the ecosystem, you widen your horizon, start getting into other spaces or marketing or sales or different things. You have a better connect with those functions then. So yes, so it's a mix of both for me.
Interesting. A side question that somebody was asking in the team when they found out that you hang out with Sachin Tendulkar and the likes.
Some perks of being in this profile.
Yeah. Do you like you have breakfast? I guess now virtually. Do you do Zooming? Zoom meetings with him? How often do you meet him?
Not right. So we meet. So he's part of the team. He is very much involved in the design process. So because we wanted to build a brand which had his all ethos into his whole philosophy into the product. So I think so he's very much involved in that part, in that sense, in the product development part. But obviously he is Sachin. So he's not. We can't be that close to him. But yes, he gets into a lot of day-to-day things sometimes.
Awesome. That's great. Welcome, Gaurav. The next stalwart I want to introduce somebody who I've had the pleasure to know him for a little while now, even before the institute got created, in my last trip to India as well. Sharad Sharma. Sharad is the CPO, the Chief Product Officer at Mettl. Mettl is one of those exciting stories. It's actually a data science-driven talent assessment and online assessment company. And I don't know if many of you know, it's an Indian company that got acquired by a global HR, called Mercer, from what we know, at least 250 crores, just about a year and a half, 2 years ago, right? So a fantastic product story, which went global and got acquired, for a large sum. Now, Sharad himself has 20 plus years of experience in technology and product management across variety of B2B and B2C domains. Before joining Mercer Mettl, Sharad was also in several leadership positions, product management positions at tech giants like Motorola, Nokia, Accenture, even Wipro. So welcome, Sharad. And we will talk about, what did you do with all that 250 crores, that you got acquired a little later. But before that, a fundamental question that I think gets asked quite a bit in the community is what are the key skills that you believe every product professional ought to have, in your opinion, is a must to have for them to move from that product role to a leadership CPO role, and of course, do it in one lifetime, right? Do it in a faster time track. What do you think are the key skills, Sharad, that from your own experience that is going to help you propel from a product manager to a CPO?
Hey, Pinkesh, glad to be here. And unfortunately, while you were asking the question, I got disconnected. So would you be kind enough to repeat it, please?
I kind of knew, because I was asking you about the 250 crores, and I knew you were not going to answer that part. So the question was, what kind of skills do you believe has helped you, and in your opinion is the key skill for any product manager as you kind of move up to a CPO role?
Right. So what I truly believe is that, a product role, whether it is a product manager role or it is a product leadership role, The very key to that role is basically the EQ that you have, the emotional quotient that you possess. And that is the very basic thing, because what you are dealing is essentially you are creating products for people to consume, right? So your customers are people, your teammates with whom you actually engage and then create a product are people. So you need to you are interacting with people at every step of the way, and then actually are creating something for the people. So EQ is, I think, something which I feel is very important. Empathy, again, because unless you are able to put yourself in various stakeholders and customers' shoes, you will not be able to understand the core problem that you're trying to solve, right? Communication is something that cannot be stressed enough, whether it is written communication or oral communication. And I think the last part, which is a soft skill, which is very core, is essentially being always able to look at the big picture. I think that separates, a product person from a initial product manager positions to a leadership position, because while at a product level you're looking at your metrics and KPIs, which are more product and feature driven, but in the leadership scenario, I think the stakes are much higher, right? So you need to be able to look at the big picture and then be able to move the big blocks around, be influence various decisions. Now, these are all the soft skills. And when I come to, let's say, the technical and business skills, I think for a product manager as well as a leader, I guess customer focus is something that has to be there. I mean, that is the base at which all the decisions should be made. Another thing which is very critical is essentially having a business focus. Now, me being a techie and started out as a techie and then getting into product, the business focus was kind of missing in the initial few years. But then at the end of the day, we all are here to solve a customer problem and then make money in the process. So being business oriented is extremely critical. And lastly, I personally believe that, a bit of a technical knowledge or domain knowledge is extremely important. Now, while it is not a deal breaker, but it helps you win the respect of engineering teams and your peers at the company. And you can, the discussions and the conflict resolution, that becomes slightly easier. So that's my take.
Brilliant. I think very good nuggets and insights. And I'm going to come back to a few questions that you kind of probed on, which we also hear in the community quite a bit, and get the views for all of you, as I kind of get started this debate, get started this conversation. But let's get back to see if we have Anurag. Anurag, are you able to hear us now? Or I guess you were able to hear us, but let's see if we can hear you. I lost the video for Anurag. Okay, looks like this pizza is going to take a little longer to bake, so we will give it some time. One question, and I'd like to, before I ask that question, I'd like for the event team to also put a poll on the screen, and this is the CPO poll 1. So the if you were to kind of summarize, and this is, I think, something what you, Rajiv, mentioned as well. I think Sharad, you were to summarize your number one responsibility as a CPO, what would that be, right? Again, making that shift and transition from a product management to a CPO. But before we ask you all your view, we want to ask this question to the audience. Now that we have about 700 plus people live with us, let's kind of see what this group of people feel around this question, that from what they know, what is a key responsibility for a CPO? And I think the options are on the screen for all of you to vote. So we'll give another few seconds for the votes to compile, and then turn it over to our panelists on what they believe is that one unique thing that allows a CPO to be called a CPO as opposed to just a senior product manager? Okay, let's pause the poll and publish the poll results so that everybody can see it. So not very surprising, yeah. Looks like you know, most of them feel that it's all about the strategic product direction, you know, as opposed to people management or as opposed to resource management. And you know, few of you who were candid enough and brave enough to admit openly that, you know, they don't have the idea. And I think a lot of people didn't have the idea when I grew up in my product management role. Honestly, I did not have an idea, you know, how this works. So with that, you know, opening it up for you, Rajiv and Gaurav, any thoughts on how you see it in your world?
So while strategic product direction is obviously super critical and super important for a chief product officer or even for any leader within the organization, at the same time, it's a tricky thing to kind of just keep your head in the clouds and kind of step away from an operational aspect of the role, right? End of the day, having a very close understanding of what's happening on the ground, who are your users, what are they doing, what is really happening. And so being able to kind of have the detail-oriented ability to still, while you can kind of compartmentalize about strategy and then at the same time execution and detail, I think the two go very much hand in hand.
Interesting. Very good. Gaurav? I do see Anurag back on the screen. Anurag, are you able to unmute and you know, see if we can hear you? Yeah,
Can you guys hear me now?
We can hear you now, finally, loud and clear. Yes.
Apologies, everyone, and a good evening, Pinkesh and fellow panelists. Sorry for being a party pooper, but you know, these kind of things always happen, especially when you're doing a demo, right? Yeah, so I'm sorry I didn't get the question. Either I can take the first question or we can go over whatever we were saying.
You know, I was going to say, forget the question. The back chat was that when you're late, you get a free Domino's. So I think now about 800 people are expecting a free Domino's from you, Anurag. So I think we're super excited about that. No, just kidding. We're also more excited about your answer. So I think the current conversation that was going on, and I'll kind of ask your opening question as well in a second. But the current trend, the current theme of the question was, Anurag, what is it that one thing, what is that one, you know, kind of key skill, key area of work that a chief product officer finds himself or herself doing, which kind of, you know, sets it apart and allows you to be that C-level person as opposed to just being a product management leader to a C-level title called a CPO, right? What is that one thing that in your opinion, differentiates it?
You know, I wish there was one thing, but there are a few things that have to come together. But to keep it simple, you know, tying the vision to the strategy and then being able to execute it. And while you're doing that, thinking from big term to immediate short term, you know, delivering what you're trying to build. And more importantly, communicating it across the board, whether it's stakeholders, whether it's a team, whether it's your cross-functional units, making sure everyone understands, you know, what is the goal that the organization or the product organization is trying to achieve, and how will we get there? So kind of rallying the troops, making sure the message goes through the ranks, you know, showing the big picture, but executing for the short term. I think when all of that comes together, you know, that then it makes a great opportunity for people to recognize what you bring to the table and what product organizations can really do.
Good point. Gaurav, you wanted to say something?
I'll completely agree with Anurag. So I think somewhere being able to understand the requirement from consumers' perspective and then being able to translate this to different functions internally. So even for me, I think somewhere communication is one of the biggest things. Being able to bring in synergy in terms of efforts that are going in. I think that's the biggest thing for us.
Seems like a common thread with a lot of you on the call, on the meeting today. You're saying, the ability to tell a story, ability to convince, ability to articulate is a very important thing.
I think one more thing we can look at is ability to inspire and motivate. I think that's another thing which is very, very critical, because every function is coming in with a different mindset. So somewhere they look up to us for that inspiration and motivation. So I think that's another softer aspect that is very critical.
Very good. Here's a question that I think a lot of people also often wonder and many times struggle with, right? How do you pitch for this role? How do you know you're ready? Or if you think you're ready, how do you tell others that you are ready? Any experience in your in your journey? Or how do you pitch for this role? How do you tell someone, hey, look, you know what? I'm ready for a CPO. What would be your advice to them?
So in my case, so I was obviously working closely with other functions. So I had that understanding of the way these guys were working, other guys were working, and the bottlenecks they were facing and the way they were thinking. So I had that understanding. So I think somewhere the whole system saw me getting that knowledge. So I think that's how it happened. So I never had to go up and talk to anybody and push myself there. But it just happened. So I think somewhere the system would see it. If you are able to get into other shoes and understand the problems, system will eventually see it. If they don't see it, I think just going up and just asking for a role makes a lot of sense. So being direct makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with Gaurav on this, right? I mean, either in some cases you end up founding your own company and you end up becoming a chief product officer, or chief technology officer, or CEO, or in other times you have built a network of people who you've worked with over time, right? And it automatically, it's just like a symbiotic relationship where they look at you, they look at your abilities, and then just, you get pitched, right? And otherwise, yeah, being able to go directly and have those tough conversations are super critical, because that's probably one of the single biggest things that a product manager needs to have, is the ability to have tough conversations, right? Because it's easy to say yes to everybody who comes and asks you, but the ability to say no and then ruthlessly prioritize, right? This same vein of being able to go have these conversations and building that people network, right? Because as a product manager, when you're starting off, you don't really have any reporting relationships, right? You're literally a peer, but then you're being held accountable for success of large launches. So the ability to convince people and take them along with you, right? And I think that becomes a super critical feature. And then slowly, as you kind of gain experience and as you get, go up the ranks, you start to kind of, this just becomes natural, right? And so I think a combination of these things is super critical.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would like to add here, and I think it's a pretty apt analogy out here that, so in this case, you yourself are the product, right? And you need to kind of want to grow, right? And so what I've seen, in fact, and it's a personal experience as well, that even before we get to a role officially, right, one can already start contributing as a leader, and it could be via thoughts and actions both. So that would mean essentially not to kind of have a boundary wall around your roles and responsibility. Most of the companies, especially the startups, right, we are looking for people who are problem solvers, who are a consistent contributor, who are strategic thinkers. So once you have that innate ability to kind of, roll up the sleeves and kind of get down and dirty, solve the problems, go beyond your own area of responsibility, I think organically you get noticed, and then in a fair organization, you generally get avenues for growth. If that is not happening, then of course, like my fellow panelists mentioned, that there's always a discussion that can be scheduled, and you can make your aspirations known to the higher ups, and then they may kind of give an opportunity where you can showcase your skills.
So I guess what all of you are saying is that, let the skills do the talking instead of you do the talking. Let your work kind of reflect and signal to the people around you that you're ready. In some sense, what we call demonstration of skills, as opposed to asking for it or trying to stage this conversation. Okay, fair point. Now, interestingly enough, and I'm glad this elite panel has been put together the way it has been put together, because some of you come from a very tech background. Some of you come from a very strong design, background. Some of you come from a hardcore product management, right up and up, background. And so, my question to all of you, as I'd like for you to comment on, is that do you believe it is necessary to spend several years in product management to become a CPO? Can you become a CPO with a non-product management type of ladder path, right? Or is it absolutely necessary or must that you have to be a product manager? But before we ask you, let's put the poll question again one more time for the audience and see what the group here thinks. And so the options are all on the screen, and the gist of the question is, do you have to be in an official title of product manager to grow up the ranks and to become, a CPO? For those who are putting your responses on the chat, instead use the poll so that it gets calculated and it gets calibrated, and we actually have an accurate understanding of the group, right? So use the poll instead. For many of you who have not started asking your questions, and I'm going to turn it over to all of you in the audience in the limited time that we have, but we will still take a few questions. Please post them on LinkedIn at the thread that was shared before, and it's again going to be shared in the chat window. Okay, so let's pause. We've got about 500 responses or so, and the results are here in front of us, in the screen. And so looks like, about 40% or so feel that you have to go from the product management ladder path. The other 40% or so thinks, you could be any functional leader, could be an engineering leader, could be a project leader, could be a sales and marketing leader, but as long as you have good leadership skills, you can kind of get there. And not surprising, so about 18% of this poll says, hey, look, we don't know what is a clear path, or if there is even one, and if there is one, we don't know how to get there, right? So that's kind of what the audience thinks. Now, what do you guys think? And whoever wants to start first.
Well, let me
I'll go.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Anurag.
Sorry, go ahead. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so my humble take on this is, one is to get there, and second is to be successful, right? I've been in product management for the last 10 years or so, and my humble belief is, if you have to lead a team and you have to build great consumer products, enterprise products, you have to do it your hands. Oftentimes, I've seen people who get to that role without product management experience, and they're successful, but more often than not, it's a hard journey, because being able to manage and understand problems, right? How do you structure a problem? How do you solve for it in the short term, long term? And how do you prioritize? How do you make those trade-off decisions, right? Mm-hmm. And if it's an engineering product, you have to work closely with engineering, you have to work with design, you have to be able to understand the pain points, get them inspired, motivated. So if you don't do it your hands and you're not hands-on, it starts becoming far more harder to be successful in that role, because you will not be able to appreciate the challenges that your team has, or let's say engineering, design, content for that matter has. So I almost think, to be a successful CPO, it's best to really do it your hands and grow through the ranks. Of course, there's some talented people who can easily make shifts across functions, and hats off to them. But at least in my journey, I just feel that a good, successful CPO is one who kind of understands the tricks of the trade.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm with Anurag on this, right? I mean, this question is kind of akin to asking, can you become a great chef without ever tasting what you've cooked? Mm. Right. You just have to have the insider's perspective, having dealt with the challenges, dealt with the problems. I mean, Anurag put it very succinctly, right? And it's always great outside in, the grass is always greener. But when you're an insider and you know the grind and what you need to do to solve for different, say, scenarios and use cases, right? Because a big chunk of leadership is experiences that you've gained over time that you utilize to anticipate and circumvent, in your current role. And so I think it's very critical to have spent a few years in that cohort to truly understand what it is.
Gaurav, you have any contrasting thoughts? Because
no, I think I will go with these opinions. Only thing is, see, it's always better if you come with a product management background, but I don't see that as a limitation. I didn't come with a product background. I came from a design, moved so completely right brain space, moved to a more balanced space in that sense. So I would say it also depends on the person. I think somewhere the whole being able to come across as a dependable person, being able to quickly learn, adapt, I think that matters. And especially now with COVID coming in, I think that element will play even more.
Good point. Sharad, I know you come from a very technology-driven background and a very hardcore engineering, and obviously you are a good role model for a lot of engineers who may think, hey, look, there's no way we're going to make it to product management, let alone, getting into a chief product officer role, right? What's your thought?
So I think I actually agree with all of them, because it actually depends upon the kind of industry you are going into. I think majority of the roles, I would highly recommend that, you should have some semblance of product management experience so that you appreciate the journey, the problems that you face on a day-to-day basis, like Anurag and Rajiv, correctly mentioned. But I also agree with Gaurav. So for example, in today's world, when you look at engineering students fresh out of college, starting up a startup, right? They have zero experience in pretty much anything. But are they not successful as CEOs and CPOs? And I think when the companies do start up at such an early stage, so you do not even have a CPO role there. You basically have a CEO and couple of guys who are doing pretty much everything, right from opening the doors in the morning and then developing the product and selling the product and marketing the product. So so it largely depends upon the kind of industry, the kind of company that you are getting into or starting up. But yes, like Gaurav rightly mentioned, it's more of a balance between the right side and left side of the brain sort of a role.
Good point. So I'm gonna, turn over to some questions that I'm seeing here getting accumulated from the audience. One of the questions that I think I'm sure it's on the mind of many, and Shishir Agrawal is asking. He says, what change do you envision in the product management role post-COVID? And I'm sure this question is going to be a popular question in most debates, most conversations, most seminars and webinars that are going to happen for the next 9 months at least. What's your take? Not so much on the business, which could be a long commentary, but specifically on the product management, position, role, need, demand as a profession. What do you think? Is this going to be bad news or good news, or no change in the news?
So I'll go first. So I think it again it depends. So you know what? So most of the product management answers, they generally start with it depends. But typically what I see is that since a product manager is actually at the center of the action, right? They are the ones who are trying to set the vision, get the strategy aligned, and then act upon that strategy, which basically means coordinating with a lot of teams all around. And now with COVID, I think this whole mode of coordination is now changed, right? So we are all now online. We are now dependent upon the technology to connect us. It's mainly phones and via apps like Zoom and Skype, etc. So that is the biggest shift that I see, which could again prove to be a challenge in certain conditions, because people who are habitual of having more offline sort of discussions and coordination. So let's say if I need to get some strategy behind a new idea, and I need to have the whole, let's say the management team, the engineers, marketing, design, everybody. Now I think only the medium has shifted, right? So that is what my experience has been in the last 1 month, that I've been sort of tied up in my house, working and trying to coordinate with the teams. The second part, the good part, I think, is post-COVID, we will see a lot of opportunities in a lot of different space, be it B2C, B2B, and I think we are already seeing, like we were discussing before the panel discussion started, right? A lot of companies who would basically now try to leverage the various opportunities that are opening up in a post-COVID world. Be it in healthcare, be it in rapid testing, be it in food delivery, and why not video calling, like we were discussing.
So again, directing the question more for others to comment, specifically in the product management profession, do you think? Let me refine, on behalf of the asking the question. Do you think there will be going to be more number of product managers that's going to be needed? Do you think there's going to be the existing product managers will have to reskill, upskill to a different level, like what Sharad is saying, get more digital, understand the customer more digitally, as opposed to maybe face to face? Give me some kind of pointed commentary on what you believe is going to happen with your teams and just product management, professionals in general.
I think, and the stage of the company is in is super important, right? If you're in still an early stage startup trying to get product market fit, you don't have the structured, things set up where you can just remotely do everything, right? Like Sharad was pointing out, product managers being at the center, being the glue of everything else, it's very critical that cohesiveness and the ability to collaborate, how they facilitate that, right? I'm not saying it's not doable. There have been tons of exceptions for companies which have had only remote employees which have done well, but I think it requires a fundamental mindset change and rigor and discipline across all different cohorts, right? And that's not easy. And especially if you're early stage, since there's still so much randomness, it becomes super hard. And even from an energy perspective, right? People derive energy by being around other people, right? The extroverts, who a lot of product managers are extroverts, right? And so the ability to convince people, the ability to have these back channel conversations, because a lot of those things go into how you prioritize and how you do things. And so I think it'll be a significant challenge. So I think depending on if you're like in a very well-established big company building enterprise grade products, I think it's still doable. But if you're more on the consumer internet and still trying to get product market fit and you don't have any major products out, I think it's going to be very hard.
Interesting. You guys see something different in kind of the FMCG apparel space, Gaurav and maybe Anurag? Obviously some of these retail and more physical industries are probably going to be arguably more hit than maybe software, and Mettl can still keep on doing assessments online, and ClearTrip can probably still figure out a way, although it's going to be a tough thing with the travel industry also taking a big hit. But how do you see that making it easier or difficult for product management as a function?
So in my case, I think for apparel as such, I feel that I think life will get tougher because our starting point always used to be the consumer, and the consumer mindset itself has changed drastically. So in the last 20, 30 days, I think that has changed. So somewhere being able to again go back to the consumer, understand the priorities, then rechannel the things. Then as other fellow participants also said that the whole digital aspect coming in, because traditional companies like mine right now, we are not really used to that digital space. So we were looking at it more like a extension. Now I think that will become the core. So I think some paradigm shifts will happen, and I think it's full of opportunities. I think so obviously it's a tough time, but I also see a lot of opportunities coming up. A good time to innovate, a good time to come up with newer ideas, newer business models. So I think all that will happen now.
Interesting.
Yeah, if I may add, I'll break it into two parts. A, the importance of the function, and B, how easy or difficult it's going to be for product managers to operate. If I look at it from an importance perspective, I believe COVID-19 is going to fundamentally change a lot of things for consumers, customers, whether it's offline, whether it's online, whether it's retail, whether it's food, whether it's booking tickets, right? And so fundamental change in consumer behavior demands that, some functions such as marketing, product management have to step up. Because if your consumer behavior has changed, you now have to look and understand the context, and then within that context, see how you're going to solve that problem. The second thing is, I think, movement towards digital. A lot of, your brick and mortar will now look at alternatives, which is digital. And to that, from that perspective, I think digital product management is going to get more and more important. If you look at EdTech, and I did EdTech for a while, we forever talked about virtual classes and digital classes and MOOCs, but it really had to take something like this for it to get adopted by millions and millions of students and universities the world over, right? And so people now realize that, it's actually a doable thing, right? You can actually learn and teach through a digital platform. The same goes for healthcare. So I fundamentally believe that, given the changes, the paradigm shift, this role is going to get importance. Is it going to be easy or hard? It is going to actually get harder for people like us, because you almost have to work cross-functionally with so many, different functions, engineering, operations, marketing, design. Sometimes getting together in a room, a war room, if you will, or just, getting together onto a whiteboard and solving and taking out 2 or 3 hours, much more easier than doing it digitally. Part is understanding your customers. And, at least, what I've seen is when you are in touch with the customers, you go out, speak to them, it's far more easier to understand their context and their problem, and hence build solutions. So it's not going to be easy, but I think it's going to be a lot of opportunities for this function to grow in days and years to come.
Awesome. We are just about out of time, but I think the amount of questions that we have received is just mind-boggling. So I'm going to try and give a summary opportunity by pointing 2 questions as each one of you going to quickly summarize. And again, I think for those who haven't seen the response to your questions, I definitely encourage all the panelists to answer them on LinkedIn in a kind of post session, so that you can actually hear from their insights as well. But I think Saurabh Singh had a very good question on what is that one metric or one thing that a chief of products is measured on, right? So in other words, if I were to paraphrase Saurabh's question and Gargi's question and Aditya's question and kind of combine it into one in interest of time, two quick things as we kind of summarize from each one of you and get quick responses, 30 seconds or less response, right? So first is, what is the one thing that you're measured on? What is that one metric that you are going to be measured on, whether you've done a great job as a CPO or not? And for the flip of it, as a lot of people are aspiring to kind of move into this product management role. Forget CPO, they're still on the fence as a project manager, as a business analyst, as an engineering leader. Do I move into product manager? Or if I move, what is that one thing that you are going to need to see before you hire them? So 2 questions. What is the one thing that you are going to be measured on as a CPO? And what is the one thing that you wish to see before you hire a product manager in your team? We'll go with you first, Anurag, as we wrap this up. Oh, every time I ask for a Domino's, it never happens. So I'm gonna not call out your name and let you kind of spring back in. So Rajiv, why don't we go with you?
Okay. So I think the one metric, right? If it's a new product, I think it's product market fit. That is basically what it is at the end of the day. And if it is an existing product, then I would say growth. When I say growth, I include profitable growth, that is, right? For an existing product. Regarding people looking to make decisions about switching from other functions to product management, can you just refresh my memory? What was the question on that?
How would you hire? What is the most important thing you look for when you have to hire a product manager?
Structured problem solving, right? Going back to first principles, structured problem solving, and people skills. I would say these two are probably the most important things. Having a tech background and everything else is great, and it's important. I myself am a computer science engineer and a master's, but there are a large number of roles where people can learn and kind of do that. But I think having the ability to solve problems in a very structured manner and being able to work with people across the board, I would say are the two most important things.
So put a process, put a framework driven solving of the problem, very good. Okay. Anurag, looks like we have you back.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Sorry about that. I wish there was one metric that CPOs could be evaluated on. But for us, I think it's going to be a function of two things. One is, of course, sales and revenue. The other is NPS, and we take NPS very seriously. At the end of the day, we want to build products that our customers love. And so, of course, NPS for us, which is Net Promoter Score, is going to be extremely important for me and my organization to be measured against. Coming to your second question, what is the 1, 2, or 3 things that I or people may look for? Kind of similar to what Rajiv said, right? So I kind of break it into, being able to solve a problem with proper framework and structure, as Rajiv and you alluded to. Second is the ability to work cross-functionally, inspire teams, work with them, whether it's design, engineering, content, operations. And the third is process. At the end of the day, you want to build great products and you want to build it repeatable, scalable, and in a lean fashion, MVP, if you will, or MVLP. But the ability to bring in process so that you not only are following a lean process, but other people are learning from you. I think those are 3 things that I typically look for, for product leaders.
As opposed to being kind of intuitive and more ad hoc, you're saying kind of put a system in place, learn how to kind of decide, make decisions through a structure. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Real quick, Gaurav.
Yes, I agree with the opinions shared. I think ability to, so obviously we are judged on the business part. I think that's the final judgment. Somewhere the ability to move across, connect across functions. And I think somewhere what I also look at is ability to build the ecosystem. Because I think because you're dealing with so many people, how you prioritize or how you ensure the communication flows and who adds what to the whole bucket, and that becomes important. So channelizing those energies, being able to build the ecosystem. For example, somebody is looking at competition, somebody is looking at future opportunities, somebody is looking at how to market a product, how to connect with the consumers better. So being able to create that ecosystem so the communication flows better. I think that's one critical aspect for us.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot that all of you can offer, and with amazing wisdom that's kind of pouring in. I hate to put a pause to it, but unfortunately we will have to. Our next keynote starts in 5 minutes. So with that, Sai, over to you. I think you guys have been a fantastic group of panelists, and I think virtually a big round of applause to every one of you. And thanks for sharing your time, your wisdom, your insights for the rest of the gang here. And I think if you can kind of pay a quick look to the thread on LinkedIn so that you can kind of answer some of those questions that we couldn't take it on the air here, that'd be really fantastic. Thanks a lot, guys.